The future of orthodontics is evolving and changing every day. But although the way to achieve practice growth has changed, there's never been a better time to be an orthodontist. Let's get into the minds of industry leaders, forward-thinking orthodontists, and technology insiders to learn how they see the future of the orthodontic specialty. How will digital orthodontics, artificial intelligence, clear aligner therapy, remote monitoring, in-house printing, and other innovations change the way you practice? Join your hosts Dr. Leon Klempner and Amy Epstein each month as they bring you insights, tips, and guest interviews focused on helping you capitalize on the opportunities for practice growth. And now, welcome to the Golden Age of Orthodontics with the co-founders of People and Practice, Dr. Leon Klempner and Amy Epstein.
Welcome back to the Golden Age of Orthodontics. I'm Dr. Leon Klempner, retired orthodontist, part-time faculty member at Harvard Ortho, and as always, joined by my co-host, my partner, and most importantly, my daughter, Amy Epstein.
Hello. We are very pleased to be here with you again, and in particular, because we have as our guest today, Wes Lyon, who is president and CEO of the newly rebranded McGill and Lyon Dental Advisors, part of the McGill and Hill Group. They provide specialized tax, business, and financial planning exclusively to dentists and dental specialists, so they know what they are talking about over there. Wes is a CPA and a certified financial planner who provides objective advice to improve practice profitability, reduce tax burden, and help practitioners achieve financial independence. Welcome to the show, Wes. We are thrilled to have you with us.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here today. I'm excited. We got a lot of great things to cover.
We do. And we, for our listeners, we work pretty closely with you, Wes, and we really value the perspective that you have, and we have some shared clients. And, you know, from our perspective, we see it this way. You help our clients set goals. We help them use digital marketing strategies to meet those goals. And then we use tools like Gauge to track our progress. So it's just such a great collaboration.
No, absolutely it is. And I think some of the things we're going to talk about today are actually going to weave right back into that. And oftentimes when I'm talking to doctors and they say, hey, well, here is a proposed solution, I say, well, I've got a whole lot more cost-effective one for you. Why don't you call up Amy and Leon?
We really appreciate when you do that.
Yeah, we really appreciate when you do that. You want to do that more often? We appreciate it even more. But it's great to have you here. Good. It's great to have you here. You are like the expert in so many different areas, and I know our listeners will get a lot out of this podcast. So let's get going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I just wanted to say that you look good in front of a microphone, and it looks like you're experienced there. You have a podcast coming up soon too, don't you?
We do. We have actually recorded a few episodes, and the two of you happen to be on two of them. So as soon as I can finish the final touches on our production, we'll be launching it. Most places podcasts are available. It's called Drilling It Down. It's sponsored by the McGill Advisory, which is our newsletter here that we provide exclusively to dentists that goes over practice management, tax issues, financial planning. But as we're kind of reaching out and we realize in today's age, most of our consumers are doing things digitally, and reading is not the forefront anymore. I think a lot of people want to listen. So we're excited to launch a podcast and really bring a whole bunch of great information to dentists out there and specialists.
So let's get... Go ahead.
Let me just interject for a second. We're going to talk about OSOs and DSOs today. And for our listeners, we want to provide you with as much information as we can. So we have an expert here. We're going to try to cover as much as we can during the podcast. So Amy, let's get down to it.
All right. So tell us, the DSO, OSO topic is a big one, and we talk about it all the time. Why are they gobbling up so many independent practitioners, and where is all that money coming from?
Yeah, this is something that was coming for a long time. I'm actually shocked it took this long to get here. So I think it's important to understand where the money's coming from and why they're here. The money's coming from institutional investors, private equity. I used to work in institutional money management, and you think of somebody with a lot of money might have 10, $20 million, and that's phenomenal. And then you see a sovereign wealth fund or a pension fund, and all of a sudden you're looking at billions, sometimes trillions of dollars. And now you start to understand that there are investors out there and their pockets just don't end. And they're always seeking a higher return, something good to do with their money. And the problem is recently they've really run out of places to go. If you look at public markets, the S&P 500, this given where we are right now, this changes daily, but it's trading somewhere around 29 times earnings, meaning you pay $29 for every dollar of earnings in the S&P 500. Well, historically, dental practices have traded between 4 and 5 times earnings. So you can buy a dental practice for $4 for every dollar of earnings, $5 for every dollar of earnings. So these big institutional money managers are out there investing, and they're looking, saying, hey, we can pay 29 times earnings for the S&P 500, or look at these dental practices. They're selling 4 to 5. Can we get a team together that can manage a dental practice and go out there and get this excess return? Doesn't take a genius to figure out why they're here when you look at those two items and say, well, it's either 29 or 4 to 5. So they've entered the market and they've really increased the prices they're willing to pay. But they're here because they think they can generate a high rate of return by owning a dental practice. And that's really it. And there's a couple other factors that are making this possible. A lot of doctors are reaching retirement age. There's a good segment that need to sell. The average retirement age of a dentist, 20, 30 years ago was 62. It's now 68. So not only are doctors reaching that age, a lot of doctors have hung around longer. And then combine that with what's going on in the dental schools. It is extraordinarily expensive to go to college these days. If you're going to college, then you're going to dental school. If you're a specialist, an orthodontist, now you've got even more student loan debt. All of a sudden, you come out, and it's not unheard of to see $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 of student loan debt. And historically, these would be people that want to come out and buy a practice, but now they're sitting there looking at it, going, "Oh gosh, can I really afford to buy a practice? I'd rather take a paycheck and know that I'm going to get paid every month, not take this risk, and be able to pay off my student loans." So the combination of those two things have really needed a solution to come in. And these private equity groups have looked at the numbers and said, we can provide this solution and make a ton of money. And that's why they're here, is they're here to make money.
Well, I mean, that's totally understandable. And, I'm on the phone every day with orthodontists talking about their practice, talking about their future, their exit strategy. And, all of these are important for us to understand when we, avail ourselves of our marketing services with them, is to know exactly what their goals and plans are. And, they'll often ask me, should I sell? And, the numbers, Amy, these are millions and millions and millions of dollars. This is real money that's on the table here. And it's really tempting. And I get it. But, despite all of that money, I know there are additional factors that play into whether it's really a good fit for them to sell at that particular time. So, we typically will refer them to somebody like Wes that could give them a better perspective. So, Wes, tell me, is it always a good deal for an ortho to sell?
No, that couldn't be further from the truth. So think back to one of the first things I said, which is an orthodontic practice has historically sold for 4 to 5 times earnings. Those numbers have jumped up with the entrance of private equity. We're starting to see 6, 7. I've seen some go as high as 9 or 10 times earnings, which is fantastic. But they hand you this pile of money. And now all of a sudden you have to turn around and you have to find a place to put this money that's going to generate as high of a return as your orthodontic practice was. And many times they're trying to convince you that this is a great deal because they want the profits that they can't find elsewhere. So you have to think there is a reason that these people want to buy your practice. It's a very good reason. It's also the reason one of the most rewarding things you can do is own a practice. So the check is not a good reason to sell. Now, I'm not for or against their entrance into the marketplace. It's done a lot of good. It's done some bad. So there could be a time in which you need to sell your practice. There could be a time in which this is a good idea. I certainly do recommend that people sell to these groups. Now, that being said, just because they offered you a huge check does not mean that you should do this. And that's really where a lot of the times we send people your way is they come to us and they say, hey, this group has offered me $8 million for my practice, and this is too much money. I have to take it. Well, it's based off an earnings multiple. And they always come back to me and say, well, Wes, they're going to help me grow my practice. They're going to help me do all these things. They're going to outsource HR. I tell them, well, let's be clear. They're going to help you grow their practice. It's not yours anymore when they grow it. You just work there, right? There's better ways of achieving the things that they come in and say they're going to partner with you on than just selling it to them and getting rid of that cash flow. Oftentimes, too, doctors don't realize they can't run a whole lot of the perks through the practice anymore. They're used to running their own retirement plan. They're used to going to continuing education and paying for it through the practice. Many doctors might have their children, their families on the payroll. They can't do all these things. But most importantly, you have to agree to work back to these groups. And a lot of the doctors don't realize. They say, hey, I'm going to get this $8 million, and we'll talk about what actually consists of that $8 million in this hypothetical scenario. Not all of it's cash. Then they get the cash and they think they're going to let the cash grow. They're going to invest it in something else that has a lower return than their orthodontic practice. And in 10, 15 years, it's going to be worth a ton of money, and they'll just live off their earnings. A lot of orthodontists haven't considered that if they're making enough money that their practice is worth one of these very large amounts, their spending might be more than the associate compensation they're being offered. They might not actually be able to put all that money away for a rainy day or invest it all. They may have to spend some of it to maintain their standard of living.
So Wes, is there like a sweet spot in terms of age? I'm thinking that, if I'm close to retiring and I'm done, that there's more of an advantage of selling at that point than if I've got like 10 or 15 years to go. I've got to put on, the polo shirt and toe the corporate line. I've got to listen to, and these are stories I hear from orthodontists that tell me after they've sold that, that part isn't that much fun, listening to some, young office manager telling me, what to do and how to do it and stuff like that. So how does that play into it? It's, there's an emotional element to it, psychological element to it as well. But I was just wondering, from an age standpoint, do you find that, when you're older, it tips the scale a little closer to selling as opposed to when you're younger?
Absolutely. And I got a quick funny story for you on that one, because believe it or not, I used to work in this world buying up practices. Now, we bought financial advisory practices. We were not buying dental practices. It was unrelated to what we're doing. But I was all of maybe 23 or 24 years old at the time. And I was the guy they were sending in. So the 60-year-old practitioner has just sold his practice, and here comes the private equity firm in, and oh, by the way, this 23-year-old's now going to tell you how to run your business. You can imagine it didn't go over so hot the first couple of times I did it. But I learned from one of my bosses to just look at them and go like this. Say, hey, did you sign it? And they always look back and go, huh? I said, did you sign our check? And when they answer yes, you just politely let them know that it's my way. It's not happening your way. And not all these groups are like that, but that's certainly true. Is if you if you sign the check and you deposit the money, you now work for them. So kind of how that ties in is to your age. I wouldn't say age is the factor. It's how many years left before you're actually going to stop practicing orthodontics. And that magic number is 5. Now, I'm not saying that if you're 5 years away or less, that you absolutely should sell to a DSO or an OSO. And I won't say I'm not absolutely saying if you're more than 5 years away, you shouldn't sell to them. But I am saying about 99.8% of the time, if you're more than 5 years away, you should not sell to them. You should own it. You should grow it yourself, keep the fruits of that labor for yourself, maintain your independence. There's really, from a financial perspective, when you run through these numbers, it doesn't make sense when you're more than 5 years away. Now, get to the point, when does it make sense? When you are 5 years away from walking away from orthodontics or less, now you really have to start thinking about your transition plan. These private equity groups have really provided a lot of good in the marketplace for orthodontics. Historically, an orthodontic practice has been worth no more than 100% of collections, maybe 85% of collections. And that's really because that's all the bank was willing to loan them. It's not because the cash flows didn't justify a higher value. These private equity groups, they come in and, they don't have a bank behind them. They have cash. They don't care what the bank says. They care about whether or not they get a return on their money. So now all of a sudden, these private equity groups are willing to pay a lot of money. If you're 5 years away or less, you do want to determine if your practice is a good candidate for this or not. Not all practices are. Generally speaking, the larger the practice, the better they're going to be suited to sell to one of these DSOs or OSOs. But sometimes the numbers between selling to an associate for what they can afford and selling to a DSO, sometimes that difference, it can be as much as $5-10 million on a 1.5 doctor practice. You start getting into 6-7 locations, 4 associates working at the practice. All of a sudden, that gap is so wide that you really don't even have a choice. They're the only ones that can buy. So if you're 5 years away or less, you definitely want to consider this, and you want to meet with somebody who can show you the pros and the cons. It's not as simple as, hey, you're 5 years away or less, let's sell to the DSO. What ends up happening is when you sell, what they're buying are the excess profits. But I like to call them 24-karat gold handcuffs. You're going to have to work for them for a specified period of time. So what you have to figure out is the upfront check that they're going to give you, is that worth more than the profits that you're giving up while you work back for them? And oftentimes in orthodontics, it is. Sometimes it's not, but you want to know that ahead of time. You don't want to sell just to say, hey, I got so much of the dinner party. You want to find out, was keeping all that extra profit for an extra 5 years, would that have been more money to just keep it and then sell the discount to the associate? Or did they actually give me so much money that at the end of my 5 years, when I walk away clean, that I actually came out ahead? And in orthodontics, because orthodontic associate compensation is typically not based off a percentage of collections, if you have a very high producing practice, oftentimes that spread does indicate you should sell to a DSO. But there's no clear-cut answer you want to tell everyone in the marketplace. And Leon, to your point, when doctors sell younger, more oftentimes than not, 5 years later, whenever those golden handcuffs come off, they're looking to get back into private practice.
It sounds like you have it down in terms of figuring out specifically for every individual case whether it's a good idea or not to sell at a given point. Is that something that orthodontists can come to you for specifically, just for help with that decision?
Absolutely. We have a service that helps you choose whether or not you should sell to a DSO. Now, I encourage anyone to reach out if they're having this question, because sometimes it's so clear cut. I tell them, here's the other services I offer, but I'm not letting you pay me to give you this answer. It's so clear cut. I'm going to give it to you right now. And usually when I do that, it's just, no, don't do it. Here's 10 reasons why. I don't even need to see the numbers. I know what they look like, seen enough of them. But for those doctors considering it, We do have a service that really strictly hones in on that. Hey, here's what the DSO offer should look like. Here's what we can probably expect to get. Here's how it's going to impact your personal financial life. And oh, by the way, here would be plan B if you did it a different way. And we actually run those numbers out, show them, hey, here's what it's going to look like in 5 years. Here's what it's going to look like in 10 years, 20 years. And every situation's unique. I did this last week, and the doctor was going to get an extra $4 million to not sell to the DSO. Now, we've certainly done that before too, and I've had to, sometimes people come to me and they really don't want to sell to a DSO, and I have to sit there and show them, hey, this is an extra $10 million to sell to the DSO. I know you don't want to, but what's your price? At what point do you just say, you know what, I'm willing to work for him for 5 years? And that's a service that's really, we started because we felt like nobody was doing justice out there, and people were being led down roads that we didn't want them to go, and being told to do things, and there was just no independent way of figuring out, hey, is this a good idea or not?
Mm-hmm. That's great. So let me ask you a question. I hear a lot of financial terms being thrown around as it relates to selling or not selling. Tell us a little bit about rollover equity, and does that investment pay off?
Yeah, so rollover equity is when, let's say one of these organizations says they're going to give you $10 million. But, oh, by the way, I'm only going to give you $7 million today. The other $3 million, you're going to take a stake in our company. You're going to exchange part of your company for our company. We call that rollover equity. You take equity in this new entity. Now, these rollover equity amounts have been going up dramatically in value over the last 5 to 7 years. But I think everybody needs to understand why. Private equity multiples. This is not orthodontic specific, not dentistry specific. I'm just talking about private equity multiples over the last 7-10 years have just been going through the roof. They have more than doubled in many cases. So a lot of times you rolled over your $3 million and it turned to $6 million, and you say, wow, this group is so great. Look at what they did with my money. Well, all rollover equity should have done that. The multiples they're paying just went up. When they were originally buying practices, oftentimes they were buying it 3 times earnings. I mean, oftentimes they still do buy it 3 times earnings because they want to buy your practice for as low of a value as possible. So if they were buying it 3 and then the market dictates 6, 5 years later, were they geniuses, or did the market pricing just changed? And the market pricing has changed dramatically, which has increased the value of this rollover equity. And I think they're using this as a selling point, and they're trying to convince doctors that, hey, we're the geniuses that did this, rather than pointing out the obvious, which says, hey, there's more and more money chasing these, which has created more and more demand, which has created more competition. So we've had to increase what we pay, which also increases what we can sell for. Some of it's just luck. It's kind of like the stock market over the last 5 years. Besides maybe the last 6 months, it's been going up and up and up. So this rollover equity is not something doctors should count on. When we do an analysis, we tell them, hey, if you ever get $1 of this, fantastic. If it makes you rich beyond belief, fantastic. If it never shows up, fantastic. We still have your money, but you absolutely cannot count on this money to just keep doubling and doubling and doubling. And a lot of what I see in their marketing materials are trying to convince the doctors that it's actually better to own this rollover equity than it is your own practice. And don't get me wrong, there's probably a group or two out there that will be true for, but I'm willing to bet 90% plus of the groups, you would have been better off with your equity in your practice than the group. It's really just what's been going on in the market for the last 5 to 7 years. So my warning would be, when you look at an offer and try to evaluate it, look at what they're giving you in cash. Oftentimes they'll say, hey, we're giving you $15 million. And when you look, they're giving you $7 million, maybe $2 million in rollover equity. But then they're projecting their rollover equity to double in 3 years and then come up some more in 4 years. And they're putting that full value in there. I don't expect that those values will continue to go up. But I'm going to give you the positive as well, give you the negative of where we view it. The positive and what they're attempting to do is they're attempting to put a whole bunch of practices together and sell them because 10 locations are worth more than 2 locations are. So if they can get 150 ortho practices, they think they can find a bigger group to pay a higher multiple. Now, eventually the multiple game stops though. The multiples can only go so high. And some of them may even be trying to go public. The firm I was working for when we were doing this in financial advisory, their goal was to go public. It didn't end up happening. Another private equity group came in, swooped them up. But that's generally what happens. And it's been going on. People have been flipping, but it won't go on forever. You can't just continue to double. If it sounds too good to be true, as with any investment, not specific to this, it probably is. And I think the rollover equity is one where it's too good to be true. So we tend to ignore it. We try to get as much of that value in cash as we can.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So Wes, it's tradition on our podcast to take a call from one of the ortho listeners. So let's take a listen, and then you could address the question.
Hi, this is Dr. Luke Shapiro from New York City, and I was wondering, how will the impact of OSOs affect the independent orthodontic practice moving forward?
That is a great one. And I think that's the $1 million question. And this is true in orthodontics, true in general dentistry, really everywhere, is their money's here. They own a very large portion of practices compared to 10, 15 years ago. And they're certainly doing things differently, and they most certainly have an impact. Now, I tend to think they're going to have a very, very positive impact for those orthodontists that really know how to market. But things that are going to change, one, they have marketing departments, they have HR departments, they have accounting departments. They have a whole lot of things that you don't have in your independent practice. So a lot of practitioners are going to need to outsource a few of those things. And Leon and Amy, this is one where I usually send them your way. They say, well, the practice down the street, or this happens a lot. It's all the time, and I can't believe people fall for us. But they're going to help me grow my practice. I'm like, they're going to buy it and grow their practice. Yes, the world is changing. Yes, you need to get ahead of it. And yes, you need to do this. But hey, by the way, instead of selling your practice, call Leon and Amy. Maybe they can help you market rather than giving up the most valuable asset you have in fear. So orthodontists will have to market. They're going to have to change what they do to some extent. Good news is I think orthodontists in general are more prepared, because they've been having to market direct to consumer for quite some time. When the pediatric dentist referrals stopped going exclusively to certain orthodontists, and they started handing out multiple names or just saying, hey, you need orthodontic treatment, it really made orthodontists shift. So you do need to market direct to consumer. Another thing that I don't think was specifically asked but needs to be addressed is they don't just buy orthodontic practices. So how is this going to impact you? If your business comes from 4 or 5 pediatric dentists and they come in and they buy those pediatric dentists, they don't really want to own a pediatric practice. They just bought an orthodontic practice. They're going to hire an orthodontist, put them in that office, and your practice might dry up overnight. So you really need to be prepared to lose referring sources, not because you lose touch with the dentist or they don't like you, but because they sell their practice to a corporate group, and that corporate group now wants to bring in their own orthodontist. So there's certainly going to be a lot of change with it. Now, with that in mind, when the DSOs buy practices or OSOs, they have to bring in doctors. And that's probably their biggest challenge, is the doctor doesn't remain consistent. They get somebody out of orthodontic residency, they bring them in, do a couple years, and they get somebody new. There's never a brand name around this that really sticks. And a lot of times when, as I'm sure the two of you know, the main decision maker for orthodontic treatment oftentimes is the mother. And that's not a great marketing strategy around a mother. They want to know that their child is going to get orthodontic treatment from one of the best orthodontists in town. And if it costs $1,000 extra to go to the trusted name, more often than not, they're willing to pay for it. But are you willing to put the work in and become the trusted name in town? You can't just sit back and expect to be. You really need to expand your footprint. You need to be in the community. And more than anything, you need to expand your digital footprint, because they are experts at marketing. They have whole teams. They get their names out there in front of people. Now, the good news is usually when people see their marketing, the patients that want to come to your practice as an independent practitioner are going to look up more than one firm. But if they receive this marketing from one of these groups and they look at it and they say, oh, I need to bring my child in for treatment, they're going to immediately start doing research. So you really need to be ahead of the game on marketing. But those orthodontists that distinguish themselves, they really become the trusted name in town, trusted name in the community, and have the marketing down. I really think it's going to be a great time to own an orthodontic practice. And I still think when I talk to young orthodontists, best thing you can do for yourself is go buy a practice.
Yeah, it's interesting because you mentioned outsourcing, and at one point when I was practicing, when I first started practicing, I would make my own retainers because I had the time to do it, and it'd bend the Hawleys or the appliances, and I would just spend the time making it. And then it came a certain point in time where it just made sense for me to send it to a lab that could make it quicker and better, and for me to be putting the braces on and start treating the case. So I think the same is true in marketing. It's come to the point where, at People in Practice, for example, we have got 12 full-time people in various positions, including graphic design and all phases of digital marketing and technology. And it's hard to do that by yourself in your own practice. So without sounding too self-serving, I believe that if you want to compete, you really need a marketing company, whether it's People in Practice or someone else. It's beyond the scope of just having somebody on staff on a part-time basis, post on Facebook. That doesn't work anymore. Wes, you continue to amaze me. Time has flown by. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. For our listeners out there, financial decisions, require intellect and analytics, and certainly Wes fits that. But what Wes also brings to the table is honesty and transparency, and you don't get that everywhere. It's one of the reasons that we feel great about sending our clients his way for an evaluation, for example, or for financial advice or investment. So, Wes, if any of our listeners would like more information about your services or would like to contact you, what would be the best way to reach you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing quick too I want everyone to know is a lot of these companies marketing about this DSO stuff, what you don't realize is they're being paid by the DSOs to do it. So be very careful of who you're listening to if you're making this decision. That being said, you can contact our office at 704-424-9780. Again, that's 704-424-9780. And ask for Janet Blair. My email address is also wes.lyon@mcgillhillgroup.com. Also, something I really encourage people to do, and I'm very excited because the topic we're talking about today is going to be top of mind, is November 4th and 5th, we're having our annual McGill Hill Group Summit here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And one of the biggest things we're doing for orthodontists and general practitioners, other specialists, is addressing this very issue of, hey, the private equity money is here, the DSO money's here. What are the things you need to do as an independent practitioner in order to make sure you prepare for this and you're ready for the future and that your practice is going to thrive in the future? And I'm very excited. I know both of you will be there speaking on our behalf, so we couldn't be more thankful and excited to be there. But oftentimes I tell people there's a whole lot of information if you're not as familiar with the group. We do offer continuing education for our seminars, so we recommend that you come to one of those, see what it's all about. At the very least, I promise you'll get objective financial advice you take home. It'll be worth your time. But I'm especially excited for this one because we've got a couple outside speakers. you two being two of them, that they're going to come in and really help address these issues and help you grow your practice and really face these corporate groups head on before they do become a problem. Also, you can get 10% off using code SUMMIT10 at our website. So if you go to McGillHillGroup.com, there's a CE events section of it. You get 10% off your registration if you go there for listening to the podcast. But we're very excited. It's going to be a great event, and the two of you are going to be there, and you're always great to hear speak as well.
Thanks, Wes. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for being here today. Good to see you as always. I'm sure we'll be in touch again shortly, as we do on a regular basis. So have a good one, Wes, and thank you again.
Thank you both.
You can subscribe to the Golden Age of Orthodontics or download other episodes of our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud. And if you want to see our faces and see Wes's face, you can check out the video version of this podcast on YouTube.
This episode is powered by ULab Systems. One of the reasons we like them so much is they offer orthodontists a lot of flexibility. Their pay-per-aligner pricing. With that, you could treat minor cases, hybrid cases, combo cases, complex cases, and all do it more profitably. And by the way, this is unbelievable. ULab is giving away a free case to our podcast listeners. I can't believe that. It's true. And you'll get, I believe, up to 40 aligners free. I may be wrong on that. I'll have to check it, but you will get to do a free case. And if you go to our website at pplpractice.com and click on our partner page, there'll be a little form to fill out. And when you do, you'll be able to reach out and they'll help you get your first case going for nothing, free, nada, zilch, on the house. Goonish. Goonish. That's what it is. I know nobody knows what I'm talking about.
No, but including me, I have no idea
goonish,
what you're saying.
Goonish. It's a goonish. It's like two Jewish women talking, and
it sounds like Yiddish to me.
You sent your son to an Ivy League school, and now look, he's working a job. He's making goonish. Anyway, Google it, and you'll see what it means.
Nobody can Google it because nobody knows how to spell that.
I looked it up. I Googled it myself. Gornisht. Goonish. Anyway, thank you so much for watching and or listening. If you want to contact me directly with any marketing questions, shoot me an email at leon@pplpractice.com. Remember, it has never been a better time to be an orthodontist. We're in the golden age. Thanks again, and bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to the Golden Age of Orthodontics. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or visit our website at thegoldenageoforthodontics.com for direct links to both the audio and video versions of this episode.